Welcome to Betrayal Trauma Recovery, BTR.org. I'm Anne. I'm sure you remember what it was like when you were searching for help, maybe for your husband, hoping to find the right program or therapist. That's why I started podcasting. I supported my husband through 7 years of pornography addiction recovery, and not one therapist during that time told me I was experiencing emotional and psychological abuse and sexual coercion. I didn't want any other woman on the planet to be in the dark. If you're like the majority of my listeners, you're experiencing the type of abuse that's invisible and difficult to wrap your head around. Your husband is using porn or having affairs or lying to you, and you're getting the same bad advice about how to improve communication or your relationship. If you need support from women who totally understand, check out our daily group session schedule at btr.org/group. We'd love to see you in a session today. One simple, anonymous way to help spread the word is to click, follow, or subscribe to the Betrayal Trauma Recovery podcast on your favorite podcasting app. While you're there, every 5-star rating helps make this podcast more visible and will help save other women from getting the wrong kind of help, like a couple program that will make this type of abuse worse. For those of you who follow or subscribe to this podcast, thank you so much. Your support means so much to me. I have a member of our community, we're going to call her Felicia, on today's episode. Welcome, Felicia.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful you're sharing your story with us. So let's start at the beginning. Can you talk about how he seemed to you at first?
We met at a Bible college, and the first thing that I asked is, could I use his book? Because I didn't want to buy the professor's book. And he said, oh, this is a wonderful book. I'll buy it for you. And I want to tell you my intentions are not to hit on you or to flirt with you. So I loved that he was so straightforward and didn't have any other intentions. So we became friends because I believed that he said what he meant. We fell in love, but there was no flirting. We didn't have the same friends. So I was like, this is really weird, but I really, really like you. But it's not like this desperate feeling. And that's how we started off. It was a long distance relationship at first.
Looking back, do you think that he was being honest, or do you think he really did have intentions to have a relationship with you?
I think he just told me what I wanted to hear. I was like, it's not this desperate feeling. And he's like, yeah, me either. So let's not date right away. And I was kind of like, well, wait, I thought we would date because we both just told each other we liked each other. So it worked out really well. It was the relationship I thought I wanted at first, except for lacked an emotional side to it. But yeah, looking back, I think he just is really good at picking up on what people want to hear and then filling that in.
Like low key, hey, we're just friends type grooming.
Yes.
How did it transition into dating?
I was just leaving the area. So he said, yeah, let's just do emails and phone calls. And then he said, I want you to pray about this for 1 week, that we should be boyfriend and girlfriend. I was just kind of disappointed that there wasn't this emotional connection. I didn't have any boyfriends through life to speak of. He said, I want you to think about what you need in a relationship. So then we became dating long distance, still just talking on the phone. It wasn't gooey at all. They were like really good conversations. That to me was the perfect part of our relationship. Very good conversations about how we felt and thought. They weren't long and drawn out. It was just fun to talk to him. And then we started setting boundaries. And he said, we're probably going to pursue each other for marriage. He said, I think that I should come and get you. He was in Georgia and wanted to come to Idaho to get me. He said we should live in the same community if we're going to see if we're fit for marriage. We laid down physical boundaries, and I was like, okay, cool. I definitely don't want to get over involved physically before I'm married. And he said he needed these boundaries for himself. But as soon as we saw each other, we started crossing the boundaries that we had laid, and it didn't feel good. I didn't like it. And by the time we were back to our destination, where we were going to live in the same town, I was kind of like, what did I get into? And that was when we were dating. We weren't even engaged yet. We got engaged several months later and married the next year.
So at this time, you're like, whoa, all that stuff we talked about, the boundaries that we set up, he didn't adhere to any of them. Do you feel like you were coerced into it?
Yeah, I thought I was sinning. And he was like, we can pray for peace and forgiveness because Jesus will give us that. And it would feel so good and amazing and freeing. And then within hours, a day, or whatever later, we'd be at it again. He would say that I was seducing him, which I would feel really bad about. So I just thought I was bad. And we went to our family and our church and told them we're in sin. We're not having sex, but we're breaking sexual boundaries, and tried to get help. And so I just thought, oh my gosh, we just can't resist each other. So then when we got engaged, I was like, let's just get married right away. And I thought at least we have that connection. But when we got married, it immediately stopped. We didn't have a sexual connection. We had like a really bad beginning of marriage. No honeymoon spot. We would fight. So then I thought, oh, it's because we were sinful before. But I married thinking I was pure. So that was confusing. How did we struggle so bad before marriage? And now that we're married, it immediately stopped.
He's basically saying, I'm so attracted to you that I cannot keep my hands off you. So even though I've set these boundaries, it's impossible to keep them because I'm so attracted to you. And don't worry about it because we can just call on Jesus and he understands and we'll both be fine and we can repent. And yet he never actually repents because he keeps doing it. And then you get married and then he's just not attracted to you anymore, apparently, because now it's very easy for him to avoid physical contact. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, you said it all right. He made a lot of excuses. So that period of the marriage lasted 12 years. I lived in like a giant fog of why our sexual life had never been ignited once we got married. The sex was kind of the big red flag, but emotionally, we didn't connect. We'd had a really bad honeymoon. And after that, he would say things like, sex is just emotional for me. So if we're not connected, I don't want to have sex with you. Things like that made me feel like, well, I can't force him. Over 12 years, I mean, we started having kids together and my drive waned. So it was kind of like, well, it's no big deal now. But I would ask things like why he thought it was like that. And one time he just said he was going through medical school. So it was so strenuous that I just looked up things and thought, I bet he's too busy.
He was using any excuse he could get his hands on, like anything that he heard. Maybe women are like, oh, I'm not emotionally connected, so I don't want to have sex, which was not his case because I'm guessing we're going to find out real soon that he's having sex with someone else or he's masturbating and using pornography. But he's just trying to grab hold of any excuse he can to groom you into thinking it's your fault that he's not interested. When did you find out about the pornography use or the masturbation or the infidelity?
After 12 years of marriage, so it was in 2021. I think it was the Holy Spirit coming into my intuition because I was just like, something is wrong. And for some reason, it's bothering me more now, and I'm not going to let it stop bothering me. I had gone to lots of counseling over the years and never really found a problem with me. And I went through a major lifestyle program, like residential treatment program for depression. Had always owned up to being postpartum depressed and seasonal depression and all this stuff. And finally was like, you know what? It's my marriage. So then I went to counseling being like, it's my marriage, help me. But at this point in time, I couldn't sleep. I was just crying all the time. I was pregnant with our fourth kid, but I was like, this is not the same thing as pregnancy hormones. this is something deeper. So I just started digging and finding it on his device. And I was like, the kids could have found this. You got to make sure that this doesn't pop up on your computer screen. And he's like, yeah, oh yeah, you're right. That's really bad. I'll make sure I don't leave that up anymore. But then I dug and dug and dug and kept saying, tell me the whole truth, because I need to know that I know everything, because I'm finding images on his device.
You're finding lots of pornography and he's giving excuses or saying, I don't know.
Just kind of acting like he used a thing to watch movies and it would just pop up. So he would just exit back out, and you know everything. That's all it is. One thing that he had never done is ever had a big problem that he'd been sorry about. I had had like a number of problems, but he'd never been like, you know what, here's this big issue or problem that I feel like in marriages, two people usually have problems, but in our marriage, it was always just me.
Tell me more about that. Was it like, oh, I have a problem with my friend, for example, or I have a problem because I'm sick? Or was it like, you mean just like general everyday problems that humans have? Like he didn't have any of these regular problems?
He didn't have regular problems. I would be like, do you think you're a sinner? And he's like, oh yeah, of course I'm a sinner. But he never had any confession of like, you know what, I feel really bad about this. He didn't actually even say sorry. So I didn't learn about gaslighting till much later. But if I came to him with like, this makes me feel bad when this happens, it would turn into like, you don't know how hard it is to have a depressed wife. Or he was now in medical residency. So he's like, I think you have ADD. So I actually went to my own doctor saying like, I think I might have ADD. And my doctor was like, no, you don't have ADD at all. He didn't even seem like he had problems. I was like, I guess he's this amazing person. I guess I'm just a monster. I just decided when I got married that I was a monster and I never knew that I was. When we ever had a problem, it would go back to, I bet he hasn't forgiven me for how badly I treated him when we were first married. And that's what I just decided it was, is I just treated him really bad. He's like a super awesome guy. And he just can't forgive me because he's so sensitive. I hurt him that bad. He never had any offerings for why our marriage sucked. So I would offer things.
But he wouldn't. It was like
he
all
would
you.
never.
Abusers have a very distinct pattern. They only start their story after the real victim has started to resist the abuse. So at the beginning of your marriage, you're being abused and you're trying to resist this abuse. And he starts the story with like, everything was fine. Nothing was wrong. And suddenly she started treating me really bad, rather than saying, I actually coerced her, made her seem like I was super attracted to her. And then we got married and I completely ignored her and didn't have sex with her at all and was a complete jerk. And then she was trying to resist me being terrible. Like, if they started the story there, it would make sense. But instead, they're like, yeah, everything was fine. We got married. I thought our marriage was great. They don't tell people I was refusing to have sex with her. I was giving her the impression I wasn't happy to her. So then when people hear his side of the story, they're like, wow, she just out of the blue is like super mad at you.
The other thing is there's this common, I don't know if it's like a religious thing or whatever, but where like the man's passive and the woman pushes him to not be passive. And that pushing to not be passive is really bad. That's what I did. I was like, you know what? That was really bad that I pushed him to not be passive. I would let myself get all enraged at his passiveness. But looking back, it was like this passive aggression that he knew he was doing. And like silent treatments, he's very argumentative. Somehow he would like shut down right when I ignited. Anyway, so I learned to like turn that off and stop pushing him, especially so that we could have children, because he said we can't have children until I stop this aggression and our marriage gets better. So I like became someone who just swallowed everything. Now I go back and I'm seeing there was a beautiful woman inside of me clawing, saying, this is wrong. Something is completely messed it up. And I disagree, and I'm not just going to go along with it. That's what happened. I became someone who just went along with stuff. I didn't talk to him very much at all because he was just going to disagree and we were going to have an argument. So I just listened to him, and he would just go on and on and on and on. He was like a monologuer. That's where we were when I found porn. I finally said, I have to know everything. And he was like, oh, no, you know everything. And I said, okay, I'm never going to talk to you about this again. I'm going to ask you one more time. Do I know everything? Have you told me the whole truth about this porn that I keep finding? And he said, yes. So I said, okay, I'm never going to talk about it again. So I wrote him an email because I couldn't sleep at night. And I was like, I know that there's something wrong. And I said that either Satan's tormenting me or the Holy Spirit's trying to communicate something to me. And that's when he said, okay, let's talk. That's when he took me on a walk and we dropped the kids off, and he told me the whole truth about the previous 12 years and how he'd done porn off and on. He said it was good porn. It wasn't violent porn or whatever. He said he'd done that off and on for 12 years, actually his whole life.
I feel like when they give details, you know that that's the thing that they're lying about. Because why do you need to say that? A lot of times they do this fake honesty where they're like, this is the whole truth. I highly doubt that it was. Do you feel the same way?
I feel the same way. I mean, I felt peace for a little bit. I was like, you know what? Our marriage is totally going to work now because we have honesty. But the relationship was just as broken as it ever had been.
At this point where you're like, okay, he's told me the quote unquote whole truth, so I'm not really going to bring it up again. Did he go to therapy? Was he just like, okay, now that I've told you the whole truth, I'm never going to do it again?
I started bringing it up again. So I never decided, you know what, I'm not going to bring it up again. I did that email, and then he told me the whole truth. And then I just took the liberty to put the relationship into his hands and be like, give me a reason for all of this, because it was just such an aha thing that our whole marriage was, what's wrong with our marriage? I'm constantly like, how do two people find each other like this, fall in love, and then it becomes what it is? It never made sense. I walked around meeting people, older women, being like, can we talk? Thinking that they would be like my mentor and help me find out. But it was me that needed to find out the truth. No one else knew. And when I finally found out, I was like, I feel like this is the reason our whole entire relationship. And then that's when I realized about covert emotional abuse and covert narcissism. One, when you do pornography, you become less emotionally attentive and able.
I've started saying you become less interested. Instead of quote unquote blaming the pornography, it's like when you use pornography, you don't have the desire to be intimate with people anymore. It's not like it makes you that way. You just don't care anymore. Because I think if we say if you view pornography, then your brain gets shut off, it sort of takes the choice away. We have to recognize that they could still say, wait a minute, wait. This is hurting my wife. This is hurting me. This is hurting my family. I don't want to do this anymore. But they just don't have the desire to make anything different.
And he did start into therapy. Of course, he had problems with his counselor and didn't think it was working. And so he wanted to stop. I think he jumped around and needed to find the perfect therapy. But he found his own therapy and his own books that he thought he should read. And I actually thought the sources that he found, I thought were very good and should have been helpful. But our relationship was not getting any better. And the one thing that bothered him is I started to say that he needed to take all the responsibility for the pathology in our marriage. I was like, you need to take all the responsibility for that, because along the way I had been taking responsibility for each bad thing that I thought I did. And if he brought something up, I would be like, you know what, you're right. And I would try to change. But he never had. So then I was like, well, now you have to take the responsibility for the whole pathology. And he took that to mean I was blaming all of our marital problems on him. And he's like, this is just too much. This is just too much pressure.
For some reason, it wasn't too much pressure for him to blame it all on you.
Exactly. I know. I'm like, oh my gosh, you have no idea what I've been putting on my shoulders this whole time.
Also, it was 100% his fault. So what's the problem? Literally was 100% his fault.
He wants to back up into the original, in a marriage, it takes two people to make it work. So, like, that's what I had gone by, and I had tried to be the person to stand up and say, I'm going to do my part. And then after he completely has a secret for over a decade that I never found out about, that I couldn't know about, now all of a sudden I'm like, this is your fault. And if he really felt sorry, he would have been like, you're totally right, it's all my fault. But instead he's like, oh my gosh, that's too much pressure. This is a marriage, you can't blame it all on me. I found BTR at that time. I grew a lot and found out a lot. Really helped me. And he was just focused on porn, and I was finding out that this is not about porn. This is about every way we relate. The gaslighting and the blaming. It's just like a physical abuse problem where the husband batters the wife, except for you don't want to look bad by actually hitting me. So you hit me emotionally and there's no bruises. And I mean, I feel like it's 100% what the problem was. And so I started to get to safety. We had times where I left the house for a few weeks, I think, at a time, like 3 times that year. And that was the year we got divorced.
When did you think that you might be codependent? When was that?
It was probably 2021, actually, before I found out about his pornography. I was calling myself an empath because he would come home and have these rages, and it would really bother me, slamming cupboards when he's cleaning and stonewalling. And I would be like, you know what, this is my fault because he's had a really bad day and he didn't tell me that I did anything wrong. And he's like, he's not telling me that, I'm in a bad mood and don't talk to me. So I was blaming it on that I feel him too much. Like, he's coming home and I'm like feeling all of this and then starting in on this like fix it thing when I should just be like, oh, you're allowed to have a bad day. That's okay if you slam cupboards and stuff because you're not hurting me.
During the time where you think maybe you're an empath, was that when you thought that maybe you were codependent?
I guess we have to kind of define codependency.
So the official definition of codependent, which I do not think codependent is a thing. So I don't even want to be like this. I want to be like, people have made this up and it's a victim blaming thing that people use. And in their minds, this is what it means: characterized by excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, typically one who requires support on account of an illness or addiction. Okay, so it's saying you're the one with the problem because you, Felicia, which this is not true, but this is why it's victim blaming. You have this excessive emotional and psychological reliance on him. And that's not the case. He's abusing you and you're just trying to survive. Because in trying to get to safety, you're trying to figure out, what do I have control over? Maybe if I don't feel all of his feelings, if I'm not so excessively reliant on him, then things will get better, is what you're thinking at the time.
Yeah, almost like, oh, I need him to come home and be a peaceful person, and that's really bad of me to need someone to come home and be peaceful. It's exactly it. And you know what? I do remember asking a counselor back in 2017 if I was codependent. And she said, oh my gosh, that's a big problem. Let's work on that. I always felt like it was led by me to try to find what was wrong. I never wanted to be like, I'm here because I hate my marriage, and my marriage is like ruining my life. So I thought it was a broader problem. Maybe it was my growing up or my background. Then when I found out it was porn, she said, I want to tell you this is abuse. And I kind of rolled my eyes because I was like, oh, brother, like abuse. That was just annoying to me. And I think it was just too much for me to look into. So I waited 6 or 9 months, and that's when I found BTR. And was like, yeah, it's abuse.
So you didn't stay in that codependent place forever. You find BTR. You were like, oh, I'm not codependent. Did you use BTR services at all?
I did the group sessions and I did the individual sessions. The group sessions were mind-blowing because it was the first time I'd found a bunch of other people that completely related with absolutely everything I was saying. I thought this covert emotional abuse was like a specific problem that I had that, was obscure. Yeah, everyone in the group understood, and you didn't have to get them to understand what you were talking about. It was just like, yeah, we get it.
How was that different than the therapy that you had been going to?
All those years, I was like looking for friendships, mentorships, counselors who would say, "Oh, I found the problem that is perplexing your whole life. I mean, it's dragging you down." There's that cave analogy where I've been like locked in a cave with an abuser, but also like a slave who like feels they need to be there because they need to help the master, because that's going to be a beautiful relationship.
Yeah, once you can help him enough, it's going to be great. Just hold on a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's going to be a good marriage. That's what marriage is. And now here I am finding out that it is not the right way, and people don't understand that. I tell my friends and family, pretend like this is physical abuse, because it's exactly the same. I don't know what people think emotional abuse is, but it seems kind of at first that it's like an excuse or something. But yeah, it answered all of that. I was just desperate for years to find an answer, and it answered like all of that confusion that I had. I'm like, I don't know how these other wives find out about porn and then they just go on in their marriage, but for me, I couldn't be safe doing that.
Let's talk to women who are like, well, what if it's not abuse? Who think maybe I'm codependent or maybe he's a porn addict. How do you know that the BTR model, the abuse model, is real? Because I think some women are worried, like, okay, well, I've thought it's that before and it hasn't been that. So there's no reason to go down this abuse thing because I'm just going to find out in 6 months that it's not abuse, that it's actually something else.
I'm still kind of in that because now that we're divorced, the co-parenting is a nightmare. And I still am like, is it me? Not only that, but one humongous piece of the story is that right when I got the divorce, he turned all my friends against me, and I have no friends now. And so it's really hard to go to a church where you're connected and you have not acquaintances, but actually good friends that you get together with. And I told them about the abuse, and they were like, yeah. And I didn't think they totally got it, but I didn't think they were going to disown me. Like, these people have called me names and are not fun to see at the grocery store. So it's hard to believe that it's not me. And so I've wondered if it's me. But the main thing to ask is it confusing? I just think relationships, good marriage relationships, are not confusing. There's problems. You can see what's going on. You can try to fix the problems and try to love each other more. But this relationship was completely confusing. There was no reconciliation. There was no, now we can love each other now that we found that out. None of that. There was never any of that.
I think some women do go through a period of, oh, now that we know this, things will get better. And if they do go to a CSAT or a pornography addiction recovery specialist, they'll actually tell them that. They'll actually say things will get better now that you know this. And they kind of do get better for a little bit, but then they don't get all the way better and things are still confusing. And then some pornography addiction recovery folks, like a 12-step group or something, they'll say, well, now you have to stay in recovery, and wife, you also have to do 12-step, and you have to do this the rest of your life because this will always be an issue. And then do you just keep seeing that pattern over and over? And the problem is an abuse problem that keeps cropping up. We all have like healthy relationships with people who aren't perfect. You can laugh about it. Like, oh man, that's funny. She sometimes is disorganized and she forgets things. She doesn't become less forgetful necessarily, but the resolution is you learn, oh, she's forgetful sometimes, and that's okay. We can work with this. Abuse is not something that you can work with because abuse is always a power over dynamic. And so anytime it gets to a place where something feels resolved and you feel equal, the abuser will try to push you down again somehow. There's never going to be any resolution possible.
They're trying to stop the porn, but it's like the porn is a symptom of this power and control. So it'd be like if you get physically abused and you try to stop the hitting, and the solution is to stop the hitting. That doesn't make sense. They're hitting you because of a power and control. You're not just going to try to stop the hitting and be like, for the rest of your life, we're going to just try to stop the hitting.
But you can still like lie and manipulate and all kinds of other things.
Yeah, I also learned about the secret sexual basement from BTR. It's like, why is it abusive when someone lies to you? When you get married to that person, and let's say you build a house together, and then after 12 years, you realize there's this basement that no one knew about. And that person got to go into the basement whenever they did because they always knew about it. And the whole family is like, what? I didn't even know that we had this basement. And that's why it's like abuse, because it's his choice when he wants to go, why he wants to go. He knows all about it. And everyone else just has no clue that it was even in the makings of a construction, much less what the content of that basement is.
It's so hard. And it's also hard when other people don't know how to help victims identify this, right? Because they'll go and say, my husband, to use this metaphor a little bit longer, he left. I don't know where he's going. I'm so confused. And instead of saying, oh, well, maybe he's an abuser. Maybe you're being psychologically abused. Maybe he's doing porn in the basement. They're like, oh, he just probably needs his space and it's healthy for people to have space. And it just gets so confusing.
Yeah, the normal marriage wisdom doesn't work for abuse situations. Just don't expect so much. That doesn't work. Give, and don't expect anything in return. I mean, those were the things I grew up hearing about marriages. If you could guarantee me that both people were doing that, that's true. But the minute one person does that and the other person has no intentions of doing that, that's what was baffling. Is after all these years, I'm like, I can't believe that we're marriage partners. This is the person I'm supposed to be more intimate with than anyone else in the whole world. And I find out that you've been doing this against me. And they say it's not about you, that porn isn't about you. That's also very disturbing and not helpful. I don't know who it's about, but it's totally done to me. And like when you say to your wife, I don't want to have sex, no thanks, I'm not in the mood, or whatever your reasoning is, and then you're off having sex with yourself.
And it's not true, because they are in the mood to have sex, but they'd rather have sex with the computer. They're not being truthful when they say that. They're not being truthful when they say, I'm not in the mood. They're in the mood all the time to have sex with someone else. Instead, they should say, oh, I totally want to have sex. I have sex so much. I masturbate every day, twice a day when I look at porn. I just don't want to have sex with you. That would be the truth. And then you'd be like, oh, whoa. Instead, he's just happy to have you think that you're just unattractive and somehow he doesn't want to have sex at all because you're the way that you are. And that's absolutely not true.
There's so much problem in that when you really think about a husband and a wife, and what you just said is like, can you believe that that would just be a simple problem? No, there's so much on every level of betrayal right there. My ex explained to me that when he was trying to get me to see what porn really was, but he said this, but it really was helpful. He's like, it's like going through a drive-through and ordering whatever you want and then going and eating it in your car. And he's like, and you didn't want to eat it in front of everybody because it's kind of embarrassing that you're a pig or whatever. And even though it's bad that he was trying to get me to understand that, that is exactly what it is. It's like a menu, and I wasn't on the menu, like almost ever. I'm like barely ever on the menu.
Well, and you don't want to be on the menu.
I don't want to be on the menu either.
Basically, you're not a person to them. That's just gross. No woman wants to be like, oh yeah, I'm on the menu. Yay! Like, no.
You're exactly right.
Why do you think it takes victims so long to realize they're a victim of emotional abuse?
I don't know. For me, like I said, I kind of rolled my eyes when I heard abuse because it's like, oh great, everything's abuse nowadays. Abuse is one-sided. I get into a marriage, and if it's abuse, I have to be like, you have a problem with hurting me, and it's not my fault. And it ruins our relationship, but you need to change, and I can do nothing about it. That sucks. Not only am I not going to say it's my fault, but you're not going to say it's your fault either, and I can't do anything about it. That powerlessness, I guess.
It's awful. I think that's why women sometimes like the word codependent, because it seems more empowering to them in the moment than abuse, because there is something you can do about it. If you're partially responsible, then you can do something about it. But if you're not responsible for it at all, you can't. And that feels terrible. Some women are like, I'd rather think I was codependent because then I have some power in the situation. Whereas if I say it's abuse, then the only thing I can do is get to safety. It doesn't necessarily mean divorce. You can work towards safety, and he could have an epiphany like we talk about in the Living Free and the message workshops. At any given time, he could enter reality and realize, oh, I am being abusive. I'm not going to do this anymore. But if he's doing it on purpose, you telling him, hey, this is abuse, is only going to make him abuse you more because he's trying to like shut that down.
Right. And there's obviously a power dynamic anyway that makes it worse. Now the powerful person is mad, basically. I also think there's a thread all throughout society that kind of quiets the man and lets him be passive and not do anything about the relationship, and activates the woman and makes sure that she does everything about the relationship. I used to think it was wrong for me to think that my husband should treat me more affectionate, more loving. Those are woman qualities. You shouldn't expect a man to have those woman qualities. He can be gruff and kind of dumb, kind of clueless. It was a thread throughout our whole marriage where he's accidentally doing stuff to me, but because I'm extremely sensitive, it causes a problem. But he's really just like bumbling around in life, and like he can't be hurting me if it's not intentional. He only can hurt me if he purposely did it. That was a grooming where I was like made to believe that his intentions were always good. So I shouldn't accuse him of doing anything that might say that he had bad intentions, because he never did.
Well, and the problem with that is the reason why they're so hell-bent on proving that their intentions are good and that they didn't mean to do it on purpose is because they did mean it on purpose. And that is so hard for women to understand, that they want you to think that they are doing it accidentally. Then they can kind of keep doing it because they always have a reason to do it. Oh, it was an accident. Of course, I don't think that. If they said to their wives, no, I do this on purpose so I can exploit you, the wives would immediately be like, oh, what? No, no, no. So they have to continually convince their victims that it's accidental. And therapists love that too. Oh, you're doing it because of your childhood trauma or because of this and that, and whatever excuse they can think of, because it's just too hard to admit, no, I do this on purpose, because if I didn't, I would have to take out the trash and I would have to make dinner and I would have to help drive the kids around, and I don't want to do that. I just want to exploit her. And so I'm going to keep doing this. And instead, it's absolutely more socially acceptable to pretend like you're doing it on accident. So now that you're divorced and you can still see that he is abusive because he's still doing it now, he's still blaming you and causing problems, and co-parenting is just an absolute nightmare. What would you say to women who are starting this process of, well, I'm not sure if he's so abusive, maybe I can do something about it, maybe I am codependent? What would you say to them?
The part that I'm still wrapping my head around is my whole community of believers. Just,
you mean like your congregation or your church?
yeah, that's where I had friends. And I mean, we were moving cross country, and I've lived all over the place in his educational pursuit and career pursuit. But I had lived where I lived for like a couple years, and it was going to be like our forever home. And I actually found friends, really good friends, right away. And I guess I'm just mind boggled that they turned against me. They do not want to have anything to do with me. And they must believe I'm the bad guy, but I don't know what they believe about me. I don't know what the lies were told about me. There's like 3 towns I don't even want to go to the grocery store in because I have friends from those towns that I have seen at the grocery store and had a bad encounter with. So that doesn't even answer your question at all. It's just the part of the story that's the cliffhanger where I'm just trying to get healthy again and stand up for myself because I know I'm right and I'm trying to be my best friend that listens to me. One part of me is like, as soon as someone else says it, I'm able to believe it and be like, yeah. But I want to be the person to say something that I say, yeah. And I'm still trying to do that. I was really healthy most of those years when I was in the abusive situation. And now I'm like not healthy and like not working super hard. And I want to do that. I feel like I've had time to heal and I want to get back to being like that strong woman that I know is in there.
Would you say that maybe what you're struggling with is all of this secondary abuse that you're experiencing? Because he has purposefully now tried to convince all of these people and actually not just tried, been successful in convincing them that you're the abuser on purpose to isolate you and hurt you. So now it's like, oh, I thought I was so healed. I thought I understood, but he's still actively trying to harm you by harming your relationships with other people. He's still actively abusing you.
I told everyone the truth. He admitted to it, and the divorce was supposed to be in agreement. I wanted to divorce him. I wanted people to know that this is because of his abuse that I'm doing this. And he was saying, yeah. Now my community is beating me up in the same way I always was. They're calling me a liar, and I have like this fear now of like, I'm a victim. I'm afraid of being like that. But that's actually what's happening is like I'm another victim, and this time it's my whole community.
None of the abuse you're experiencing now is convincing you even more that it's abuse. You've done BTR group sessions, you've been to individual sessions. So the 2 things to do now are get more educated about strategy, how to deal with all of the unsafe people around you. And then start praying you can make friends in your area, people that you've never met before, people who know nothing about it, to be on your team in your local area. And you will find people, and they will be a great support to you. It might take a minute, and it might be someone who's going through it herself right now. It might be someone who you're actually going to be an answer to her prayer, that she's like, I'm going through this too, and I need help. Those are the women who tend to be the most helpful in the situation. We tend to end up supporting each other because we really, really get it. And that's why BTR is awesome, because there's nobody here that isn't on your side.
So I found a new friend, and she started to sound exactly like me a while ago. And so I decided to be for her what I would have wanted and was like, this might be it. But I don't know if you could guess this, but we're not really hanging out that much anymore. And I was trying to be gentle in case she wanted to stay. And I just don't want her to go not knowing that this might be the answer. But I mean, it's not a good way to make friends talking about people's husbands badly.
Oh, that's true. She didn't realize he was abusive.
I was like, do you guys have a good relationship? Is it confusing? Does he ever have any problems? Like, she was answering them all in the red flags sense. So I was like, it might be this. And she didn't tell me no. Like, she said, like, gosh, I had a feeling I should have been done with him a long time ago. And like, they're on their second marriage to each other. They already divorced and now they're married. Someone told me one time that they thought that my husband was into porn, and I was just like, ugh, I did not like hearing that. I was like, no, he's not. You don't understand. And now, years later, I'm like, she was right.
In order to make a true friendship, I feel like being honest is always the best policy. So if you're like, hey, I feel like this is abuse, and they're not ready for that for whatever reason, and it offends them and they don't want to be your friend anymore, then like that's okay. Maybe they'll be your friend later, because you don't want like a service project. You want a really good friend who you really get each other. If her husband is abusive and she can't see it, you're not going to be a good friend to her either, because it's going to be driving you crazy. And that's why professional services are so important, because
Yeah.
friendships really should be an equal thing, not service projects. And our services aren't service projects, because if we did them for free, we'd have to get other jobs and we would not be able to help women, but they're our job. And so getting professional services is totally different than like looking for a friend who's on your level. She's almost doing you a favor in some ways, because you would have been really annoyed all the time, you know, like, wait, she's not seeing it. If she's telling you like clearly abusive things and you're like, you know, it's not going to be fun for you either.
And then I'm just going to build another fake community of a bunch of friends that I don't want to tell the truth to. So that's not good. So yeah, I can see that. Just be honest with people and hopefully friendships will follow.
And I think that you will. It's just a hard time. Have faith and be yourself and stay true to who you are, and things will work out eventually. I'm so sorry that you're going through that right now. That is so hard. You're amazing.
Thank you so much for being beautiful.
You're amazing. You're incredible. You're strong. Things are complex. A lot of people don't like me because I say their husband is abusive. Not because I know him personally, not because I'm trying to hurt their marriage, but because objectively the behaviors she is describing are checking the check boxes that any domestic abuse services would say, yes, this is abuse. That's it. We're not making abuse out of nothing. We don't even know the people. We're just saying, okay, this is abuse. Also, we're not giving any excuses for it. Maybe he does have a brain lesion. Maybe he does have PTSD from when he served in Iraq. But that doesn't mean it's not abuse to you. It doesn't mean that it's okay that you're being abused. So the reasons don't matter why you're being abused. The thing that matters is you're being harmed. And it's not your fault, and you don't deserve to be harmed.
You're right, and I'm not going to feel sorry for spreading that message. I want women to not be harmed in their relationships, and I shouldn't feel bad about not wanting that. And I don't want that for myself either, which I forget about myself. But yeah, I don't want myself to be harmed.
But it is a lonely place sometimes. It's just such a hard road, and you don't have to do it alone. We're here for you, Felicia. And we're here for all women going through this. All I wanted to do was educate women about abuse so that they would know what they were facing, so they would have information. They could make the decisions that they want to make them and get to safety, and we can support them in doing that. And then once they feel stable and safe and that they have friends in their area, then we're like, we're so glad we were here for you when you needed us. And we wish you the best of luck. We're here again if you need us again. But unlike 12-step or even religion, that's like, you can't leave, you know, you have to stay in 12-step or you'll do it again. We're like, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're amazing. We're just here to support you through a very difficult time. And then when you're stable and you feel good and you feel like, oh, I've got some friends, we're like, yay, we love you. You're going to do great. You're brave. You're strong. You're incredible. Well, thank you so much, Felicia, for sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I can do this.
You can. You're doing great. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
If this podcast is helpful to you, please help us reach other women by following or subscribing and giving us a 5-star rating. Thank you for helping other women find us. If you've already purchased a copy of my book, Trauma Mama, Husband Drama, please circle back and give it a 5-star rating. A lot of women are searching for books about betrayal trauma on Amazon, and rating Trauma Mama will help them find this podcast, which is free to everyone. Your donations keep this podcast going. Go to our website, btr.org, scroll to the bottom, click on Support the BTR Podcast. And until next week, stay safe out there.